Welcome to StudyIQ IAS English channel. My name is Shubham Sagar. Today we have to do lecture 33, that is acts from 1858 to 1935. In the previous lecture, that is yesterday's lecture, we have done acts from 1773 to 1853. And once we are done with today's lecture, you have to club them all together. You have to read all these acts from 1773 to 1935 all at once. Whenever you are doing revision, you have to do revision of all these acts at once. Just like when you are reading, later Mughals, at the same time, you have to also read about Marathas. Fine. So let's start our discussion today. Acts from 1858. Again, yesterday we have talked about what these act means. When you're talking about Regulating Act, when you're talking about Charter Act, when you're talking about Indian Council Act, Government of India Act, what is the basic meaning of these acts? So now different phase has, we are witnessing another phase because 1857 there will be a revolt which is known as 1857 revolt, and Veer Savarkar said that this was first war of independence. Different people gave different quotation for 1857 revolt. English Crown, they have gotten opportunity that okay, East India Company, enough is enough. We have slowly taken away your commercial power. Now we'll take away your political power as well. They have already done all these things. Many people say that when you read about this Queen's Proclamation 1858 or Act of Good Government in India 1858, we'll talk about this particular 1858 Act. Then you will realize that here there's one very important thing which is attached to 1858 Act, and that particular thing is that the crown or this ownership of this British territories, they will be getting transferred from, EIC, English East India Company, to British Crown. But this is very formal, more formal than actual reality, because all this transfer has already started from 1773. You can also understand it from this particular point of view that 1857 revolt has happened. Somebody has to bear the burden of it, that why it happened. And British Crown was like, okay, EIC, you are the culprit. Now you get lost from India. In simple words, they did not say it so harshly, but hope you are understanding what we are discussing here. So let's start our discussion without wasting any time. Government of India Act 1858, Queen's Proclamation 1858. Yesterday we have talked about all these terms when you're talking about Regulating Act. So British Crown, British Parliament, happy Holi to everyone. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to regulate companies' affair in India. When you're talking about Charter Act, they are renewing companies' charter in India, mostly for 20 years, right? Then you have Indian Council Act. So earlier we had Governor General Council. From 1853 Act, we had divided Governor General Council into Governor General Executive Council and Legislative Council. Just like India's current setup, where your executive has more say than legislature with due respect to Parliament and Legislative Assembly. Similarly, there also Governor General Executive Council has more say than Governor General Legislative Council. So the act which will be majorly catering to the provision of Executive and Legislative Council, that will be known as Indian Council Act. We will see that particular act, Indian Council Act 1861, in just few moments from now. Then you have something known as Government of India Act 1858. As the name suggests, they will be having provision which more or less will apply to almost all of the British territories in India. Fine, sir. So Queen's Proclamation 1858. What are the major provision attached to this Queen's Proclamation and Act of Good Government? First of all, they will say that now, British EIC has no role to play in Indian affairs, and they are gone. Good evening, Kritika. And we will be handling the affairs. British Crown, British Parliament, they will be handling the affairs. Governor General of India post is gone, and now you have Viceroy. Oh my God, just give me a second. So Viceroy. We will have another post that is known as Viceroy. Very similar, same but different. So Viceroy is another name for Governor General of India. First Viceroy of India, Lord Canning. Do remember one particular PYQ which has been asked a lot, that who was the Governor General of India during 1857 revolt? That answer is also Lord Canning. So Lord Canning, Governor General of India during 1857 revolt, he was also the first Viceroy of India. Then this whole board of control, court of directors, this dual government setup, which we have seen during Pitt's India Act of 1784. The dual government was introduced to keep a tab on political and commercial functions. That will also be abolished. A new office will be created, Secretary of State. And this Secretary of State, who will be a cabinet minister in Britain, he'll be given a 15-member India Council. Later on, when you will read about drain of wealth theory, Dadabhai Naroji, Umesh, like different people, they will be talking about the drain of wealth from India. So they will talk about this India Council also. Secretary of State, his 15-member India Council, who will be assisting Secretary of State. They are like, dude, these 15 members, it's not like Britishers, you're paying it from your pants or from your money. You are taking it from our, exchequers, taxes, whatever you are collecting. So this is a drain of wealth. So they will attack this India Council, the economic critique of British rule. They will attack this India Council later on. Fine, sir. And then again, Queen's Proclamation, Act of Good Government of 1858. They will also tell certain things that there is no further intention of annexation in India. We are talking about 1858 right now, that we don't want to annex any more territories, bro. So chill. Take a chill pill. Take a chill pill. There is a song also. Just chill, chill. Okay, let's focus, bros. So we don't want to annex any more territories. But there is a caveat here. The caveat is you have to accept our subordination. And we will not annex your territories, bro, but accept our subordination, that you accept the subordination of British Crown, British Parliament. That is one thing which you have to do. We will not annex your territories, princely states. You rule, because they have realized, and this story you may have heard a multiple number of times earlier also, that many people felt that this 1857 revolt happened because of the incessant annexation which Governor Generals started, like Lord Dalhousie, Doctrine of Lapse, before that Subsidiary Alliance, policy of ring fence, this, that. So you are conquering territories on one pretext or the other. So many people in British Crown, British Parliament, they realize that they have to stop this annexation, but we cannot allow them full freedom. They have to accept our subordination. So these are some facts which we have to keep in mind. Do remember, we are reading it from Prelims 2025 perspective. We have to crack Prelims 2025. So what kind of questions they will form? See, it's a guarantee. It's a guarantee that they will ask at least one or two questions from acts from 1773 to 1935. And then there are certain acts which has very higher probability. We'll talk about those acts, which act they are. One of these acts is this 1858 Act. They have already asked a lot of questions. So they can ask you, which of the following act is known as Act for Good Government of India? So that is this particular Government of India Act of 1858. Fine, sir. Ended the dual government scheme. This is, here they are talking about Board of Control, Court of Directors, which they have introduced earlier via Pitt's India Act 1784. So all these things we have done, and that is what is written here. Viceroy. So this Governor General of India post is gone, are gone. And this is the Queen's Proclamation, where Queen Victoria is saying that, bro, we are very sorry for what happened in your country, the cutie pie called India, and we will ensure that no such stupid thing happens. So this EIC is are gone now. Okay. So again, now we have seen the basic gist of Government of India Act 1858, just like we had done yesterday, that first of all, we are trying to understand the basic gist, what prompted that particular act, and then we will read the expanded version. So this is the expanded version. What are the things which are important? We already know Act for Better Government or Good Government is Government of India Act 1858. Then the first things, first Viceroy, first Secretary. So first Viceroy we have discussed, Lord Canning. He was also the Governor General during 1857 revolt. Important because this is a PYQ, or this has been a PYQ already asked earlier by UPSC. Now, first Secretary of State, Henry Stanley. So this is also important factual information. Most of the people know about first Viceroy, but most of the people, good evening HM, don't know about first Secretary of State. So this is important. Again, ended company's rule, power transferred from company to crown. But again, please understand this point that this is more formal. This transfer had already started from 1773. They just want to take someone's, or, put blame on somebody, and that somebody came in the form of East India Company. Court of Director, Board of Control were abolished. Do remember via which particular act these two bodies came into existence, especially Board of Control. We had Court of Directors earlier. Fine. And this is what is written here, 15-member council called India Council was created to assist Secretary of State, who was actually one of the cabinet minister in Britain. All these things we have discussed. This is the expanded version for you so that you can read it in a slowly manner. Fine. So all these Bol Bachchan and stuff we have discussed, that has been written here. The Governor General received the title of Viceroy, and he was not the direct representative of the Crown. Do remember, first Viceroy. But as we have discussed earlier, all these things don't matter much. This transfer of power don't matter much. This transfer of power has already started from 1773. So this transfer of power is more formal than substantial. That is what is written here. Cool, sir. After a few months after this, this act, there was a Queen Victoria's proclamation just to reassure the people of India that we don't have any more annexation intentions. Also, they realized certain other stuff that if you read history, we'll talk about, and maybe you already know about social religious reform movements. So there, 1829, abolition of sati, 1856, Widow Remarriage Act. So there was another viewpoint in Britain that maybe we are interfering too much into the religious aspects of Indians. So maybe we have to stop there as well. So this Queen's Proclamation by Queen Victoria, which is also known as Magna Carta of the people of India, again important from pre-perspective. Which of the following document is known as Magna Carta of people of India? This is just to reassure Indian people that please don't do any more revolt like 1857, that actually we incurred a lot of losses. Britain won, but they incurred a lot of losses. Although that 1857 revolt, if you go by NCERT, these days I fear saying anything right now. So again, you will be seeing that 1857 revolt was confined mainly to northern India, but even then, Britain incurred a lot of losses, and they were like, dude, we don't want any replica or any other such revolt. And that is also one of the theory which you may have read about Congress, the safety wall theory of A.O. Hume, Ellen Octavian Hume. We'll talk about it later on. So Magna Carta, just to reassure people, we won't interfere in your religious affairs. We won't pass any such or more acts like sati or widow remarriage. You people do whatever you want to do, and we will not annex any more of your territories provided you accept our subordination. So again, important points. Again, this is a revision which is happening here, that all treaties made with, you read this thing, I'm not reading. The basic point here is no further annexation. Point is accept our subordination. And people are wary here. Queen Victoria was also very wary in this scenario. Fine. So this is like, the major points related to Queen Victoria Proclamation of 1858, Act of Good Government of 1858. Now we have to talk about another act which is known as Indian Council Act 1861. Everything which is happening is guided by the situation of that particular period, whatever is happening. So 1858 Queen's Proclamation, majorly guided by 1857 revolt. Indian Council Act 1861, again, majorly guided by 1857 revolt. Another thing which British Crown and Parliament, they realized was, apart from, all the annexation and the religious policy, one other thing which played a role in the rising discontent of Indians was, good evening Bulbul, was centralization, too much centralization. If you go back to yesterday's lecture, Regulating Act of 1773, Governor of Bengal became Governor General of Bengal. Bengal presidency given more power than Bombay and Madras presidency. So many people are feeling like there was a discontent which is growing among people. So let's shift from this, centralization aspect. In Charter Act of 1833, we have seen Governor General of Bengal became Governor General of India. The Bengal presidency was given more power. Governor General of India was given more power. So now they realize that centralization is an issue. So let's remove or minimize centralization and promote decentralization. So Indian Council Act of 1861, the powers which were earlier taken away from Bombay and Madras presidency via Regulating Act of 1773, Charter Act of 1833, they will be restored to a certain extent. So restored some of the powers of, or some of the earlier powers of Bombay and Madras presidency. I'm a lazy person. I don't want to write much. I like to say a lot of stuff. Restored some of the earlier powers of Bombay and Madras presidency. So decentralization. You are seeing elements of decentralization. Centralization is decreasing. Decentralization is increasing. They can give you this point when they are explaining this Indian Council Act 1861 also, that via Indian Council Act, centralization increased. You will be saying false, sir. Not centralization increased. Centralization decreased. Decentralization increased. Earlier powers of Bombay and Madras presidencies were restored. Then we are talking about the most important points related to Indian Council Act 1861. All these things are majorly guided by the earlier 1857 revolt. So this is one point. Then ordinance system. Right now, in current setup also, we see governor promulgating ordinances, president promulgating ordinances. When president promulgate ordinance, when Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha or both of these, are not in session, then they will promulgate ordinance, which is basically a form of law. Governor will also promulgate ordinance when legislative assembly or council or both are not functioning. So this ordinance system has its genesis in Indian Council Act 1861. So this is second most important point related to Indian Council Act. Third point, portfolio system. Portfolio system. So what is portfolio system? Portfolio system means what? Again, if you see the cabinet system, which we have in current setup. So you have a cabinet system, you have Amit Shah sir, you have Rajnath Singh sir, and they are the people who are very close to Honorable PM Modi sir. So portfolio system, again the cabinet system, its earlier version is portfolio system. So even the current cabinet system which we have in our means executive, so that has its genesis in Indian Council Act 1861. And then there will be some minor provisions. So these are major provisions. These three provisions are the most important provisions which you have to remember about Indian Council Act of 1861. Very good. Then the minor provisions, see, remember, again, always connect the dot. Yesterday we have talked about 1853 Act, and the most important point about 1853 Act was Governor General Council divided into Executive Council and Legislative Council. So now, and we know, out of those Executive and Legislative Council is more important. Just like current India's executive is more powerful than the legislature, with due respect to executive, legislature and judiciary. So what we are trying to say here is, in Executive Council, no Indian member will be added up until 1909. So 1909 is still very far away. But the Legislative Council, whose major work will be to make laws, here you will see 3 Indians will be added to that Legislative Council. More members will be added to the Legislative Council, and all these things will happen to Legislative Council. They will keep on happening from 1861 onwards. You will see more and more members getting added to Central Legislative Council. Then in provinces also Legislative Councils will be created. But Indians will not be there in Executive Council. Indians will be there in Executive Council from 1909 onwards. Fine, sir. So let's see the provisions of Indian Council Act 1861. As the name suggests, it is known as Indian Council Act because it is majorly associated with, increasing the numbers of Central Legislative Council and all those things. That's why it is known as Indian Council Act. So restored the legislative power. Again, all the points which we have just discussed is written here. I'm not reading the slide. That is your work. So this point, decentralization, portfolio system, cabinet system. Oh my God, sometimes I get scared my own voice. Okay. Bros, when is Holi in your place? Like, is it today or tomorrow? Here people played Holi like, give me one shot, let's play Holi. There is a song also. And I was like, I did not go there because at that time I was doing something. Otherwise, they would have killed me. So like when people play Holi like that, I get so terrified. So let's focus, bros. Portfolio system. Legislative purposes. Viceroy Council was enlarged. Again, here we are talking about Viceroy Legislative Council. Nobody has power to touch Viceroy's Executive Council. That is a very, very, alien kind of a body, very important body, very special body where Viceroy will have major say. But he will, to keep Indians happy, that okay bro, I want to keep you people happy, I don't want any revolt like 1857. So let's give some Indian representation in Viceroy Legislative Council. So 6 to 12 additional members were there in Viceroy Legislative Council, and Lord Canning, who was the first Viceroy of India, who was the Governor General of India during 1857 revolt, he nominated 3 Indians, Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, Sir Dinkar Rao. You can see him here. Okay, sir. So Indians are there in Viceroy's Legislative Council, no Indians in Viceroy Executive Council. And again, promulgate ordinances. Now, this is a homework for you. It's visible on your face, sir. Oh my God. But this is nothing, bro. People have, like even the girls who are not married, they have sindoor on their forehead and everything. Hope you can understand the way they have played Holi. They have hair here, like color here, there, everywhere. Let's focus, bros. So what we are talking about, Viceroy also has the power to promulgate ordinances. This is a homework. Again, we have talked about all these points. Now, the homework part is, you have to find out, in current setup also, Governor and Viceroy means Governor and President, they have power to promulgate ordinance. Under which articles? Articles related to current ordinance system, which articles we are talking about, 72, 161 or something else. So that is important. So yeah, let's continue the discussion. Provision made for formation of legislative councils in other provinces. See, they are talking about legislative council. No talk about executive council because that is very special to them, and only Viceroy, he will decide what they have to do regarding that. And all these legislative councils, introduction of Indians, are meant to appease us, pacify us to a certain extent, because 1857 revolt has just happened. So new provinces could also be created for legislative purposes. What about executive purpose, bro? And lieutenant governors to be appointed for them, and that will happen later on when we'll come to 1919 Act. Please understand one very interesting thing. what we are talking about, that when we will come to 1909 Act, so there we will take all these 1909, 1919, 1935, we will read them all together. We'll do a comparative analysis of all these three acts. Those three are the most important acts. You know, if you have to, let's say you have a time paucity, you don't have to like too much time to revise all acts from 1773 to 1935. So the first work will be to take these three acts, 1909, 1919 and 1935, and read them all together. Okay, we'll come there or we'll go there. So Indian Council Act 1861, again, they are doing all the bol bachchan. We have talked about decentralization is happening here. Power has been restored to Bombay and Madras Presidency. So that is what is written here. And Executive Council. Now, finally, they are talking about Executive Council. Let's rewind a bit about the history of Executive Council, and it can get tricky if you don't revise stuff. So when we have started our discussion yesterday, Regulating Act 1773, Governor General Council, they had 4 members, and then Warren Hastings, they had issues because 3 members, if they say something, and Warren Hastings and other members say something else, they will go against Warren Hastings and Warren Hastings' voice will not be heard. Then 1784 Pitt's India Act, Governor General Council was reduced to 3 members. Then we saw 1813 Act, Lord Macaulay became the 4th member, but without any voting rights. He can say stuff. Then 1853, full-time 4th member. And now you are seeing 5th member. Executive Council, he has 5th member. When we'll come to 1909, 1919, 19, Ordinance of President, Article 123. Very good year. So 72 and 161 are, I think, pardoning powers, and ordinance making powers are 123 and 212 or something like that. 213 related to President and Governor. Very good, Charita. So these are the things which we have to remember. 123, 213. Awesome, Charita. People take lesson from Charita how you have to revise stuff. So here we are talking about Executive Council. Now you have 5 members. By the time we reach 1909, we'll have 6 Executive Council member. First Indian member, 1909. And then from 1919, you will have 3 members, Indians, out of 6 members of Executive Council. 1935, same. So we'll talk about that as well. So you have to keep a track of especially Executive Council. Legislative Council will keep on increasing, 15 member, 60 member, this member, that member, official member, non-official member, you know, ex officio member. So many things will be happening in Legislative Council. But you know, the actual power lies here. Executive Council. Okay, sir. So the purpose of legislation, it enlarges the Central Council, and here we are talking about the Legislative Council, that you can have maximum 12 members, and all these things are written here. Viceroy can appoint them for this period and that period. Now there are terms here. Later on we'll talk about these terms. What is the meaning of the term official members, non-official members, ex officio members, nominated members? We'll talk about them. Those words are important from polity perspective also. When we're reading these acts actually, so here history and polity are merging. Cool. So changes in the function of central legislature. Again, same thing you are reading, and you're reading it multiple number of times. That means they are important. The act allows establishment of new councils in other provinces. Now, there is a keyword here. You can have a look at this. 2 words, I think we have discussed this earlier also. There is one province known as Northwestern Province. There is another province which is known as Northwest Frontier Province. So you have NWP and then you have NWFP. So what is the difference between NWP and NWFP? We have, I think, discussed it. I will give you 40 seconds. Think about it. And in that period, I will take some breathing. NWP, NWFP. Here you can see a new province was established, Northwestern Provinces. So is this NWP same as NWFP? So let's start the timer for 40 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 and 40. So 40 seconds done. Northwestern Province is the current UP region, you know, the Uttar Pradesh region, that is Northwestern Province. NWFP, Northwestern Frontier Province, is the province which is there in Pakistan, which you will later associate with Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who will be known as Frontier Gandhi, who will start the Red Shirt movement. So they are not same, they are different. Don't, you know, like make them or It may feel like they are same, but they are not same. And I think we have discussed this earlier also. NWP and NWFP, they are not same. They sound same, but they are different. Very good. Okay, sir. Indian Council Act, again, we are talking about all these things. They are talking about ordinances, new provinces. You can have a look at it. We have discussed it. Lord Canning introduced the portfolio system, which is very similar to the cabinet system, which you are seeing currently. Now let's talk about Indian Council Act of 1892, one of the most least functioning act, again with due respect to Indian Council Act 1892. So we have talked about acts from 1773 and we will go till 1935, 1892. See, there can be a question which can come in your mind that, sir, why are we not reading 1947 Indian Independence Act? So let me tell you the reason why we are not reading 1947 Indian Independence Act. Because Indian Independence Act 1947 itself says that we don't have anything much in our act. Whatever like constitution has to be made for India, the provisions has to be followed of 1935 Act. So in a way, what has happened when you read Indian Independence Act, it is not actually an act. So they are saying that if you want to see the formation of laws and rules and regulations, just follow Government of India Act. Take it as a base or benchmark and follow and make rules and regulations accordingly. And that's why generally when you read acts, you don't read Indian Independence Act 1947 because they are going back to 1935 Act. That if you want to refer to related to federalism, or if you want to talk about fundamental rights, if you want to talk about this and that, so for everything refer to 1935 Act. And that's why Indian Independence Act 1947 don't matter much. They just talk about that two dominions has been created, India, Pakistan, this and that. For most of the cases, go back to 1935 Act. And that's why even our current Indian Constitution, almost 50% provisions has been taken from 1935 Act. So there are reasons for it because already so many provincial elections, central level elections has happened on the basis of 1935 Act and people were very accustomed to it. Also at that time, our literacy level was not very high. So we felt like whatever we had started earlier, let's continue with it. And that's why 1935 Act is the base. So 1935 and 1919 Act, so many things we have taken from those two acts, we have to talk about it. Fine. So now we'll go there. We'll talk about those acts later on. Indian Council Act 1892, one of the most, least important acts with due respect to this act. Nothing major is happening in this particular act. So we know Central Legislative Council and even provinces, in provinces you have Legislative Council, their members will keep on increasing. While this acts also, as the name suggests, they're majorly focusing on the council and increasing the number of Legislative Council members, official members, non-official members, this and that members. Then the members who are there in these councils, they'll be given right to talk about or ask questions, supplementary questions, this questions, that questions. Then here Congress, see, 1892 Act, when it is coming, Congress has already been formed. Congress was formed in which particular year? Anybody has any idea? Let me give you 30-second timer. Congress was established in the year, like what was the year when Congress was established? One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 20. So Congress was established in the year 1885. So almost 7 years have passed. We'll talk about all these things later on also. So almost 7 years have passed, as Samrat is saying, and Indian Council Act has been formed. And when you will read about Congress, I think some of you already may know about Congress. 1885 to 1905. This is the moderate phase. This is the moderate phase, when moderates are calling the shots. And here moderates are asking for one very specific thing. As Charita and Samrat said, they're asking for one very specific thing, that is direct election. That you have the Central Legislative Council, you have Legislative Council in provinces. We want direct election. We want people to directly elect representative in these Legislative Council. So here in Indian Council Act, there will be no direct election. There will be indirect election. So Congress leaders, they are very unhappy that, dude, what is this? We want direct election. This dil mange direct election. So Britishers are like, dude, just chill, okay? We will give you direct election when we will want to. And later on, by 1919 Act, Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms, direct election will be introduced for the first time. Please remember, everything first is very important. As we have discussed earlier, your first love, your first crush, your first this and that. Similarly, when direct election was introduced for the first time in our country, that is important. And that happened not via this act, and that's why we say nothing major happened via this act, with due respect to this act, but by 1919 Act. So many things will be happening for the first time in 1919 Act. And again, 1919 Act became a base for 1935 Act, and 1935 Act became a base for our constitution. That's how you can look at stuff right now. Fine. So Indian Council Act, one of the least important act. But again, maybe now when we are looking at all these acts and looking at all the provisions of these acts, we feel like Indian Council Act is least important, this 1892. But from Congress perspective, 1885 to 1905, moderate phase perspective, this was cited as an achievement. That, bro, people in Legislative Council, they have been allowed to ask questions. That in itself is an achievement. They are talking about indirect election. At least they are giving some amount of representation to us. You know, we will elect members of provincial council. In turn, these provincial council members will elect members of Central Legislative Council. That way things will happen. But at least some amount of, or some kind of election is happening. So these things were cited as, you know, achievements of moderate phase leader. So things which amounts like nothing for us, that is exactly not nothing, but that was something for moderate leaders, with due respect to everyone involved here. So Indian Council Act 1892, increase the number of, again, central and provincial legislative council. What about Executive Council? No Indian member yet. We are talking about Central Legislative Council. Members could now discuss the budget without right to vote. This right to vote will be later on given by 1909 Act. System of indirect election was introduced. Congress moderates, they were like, dude, we want direct election. Dil mange direct election. That means the heart wants what the heart wants. Here, the heart of Congress wanted direct election. That will be coming via 1919 Act. So the indirect election, but again, these are achievements for moderate leaders. You blah blah blah. Again, here it is written who will be, you know, electing members of provincial councils. They will be coming from university, district boards. You can have a look at it. Said to be a first step towards the beginning of the representative government in India. At least something has been introduced. Some amount of election has been introduced. Earlier, everything was based on the whims and fancies of viceroy or the governors in the provinces. So something is better than nothing. Something. That is what they are trying to say here. Indirect election, and then later on, after 27 years, you will have direct election. And now you are seeing this whole thing in the expanded version. Central Legislative Council members are continuously increasing. Now you can have maximum 16 members. Non-official members are there in provincial councils. Now understand one thing. Official members means what? That you are a government official and you have been also elected, or elected, nominated, appointed to the council, whatever may it may be. So, and then this is official member. Non-official member means you are not a part of government machinery, but you have been elected, nominated, or appointed in the council. So that is the basic meaning here. Then there is a term called ex officio member. And this you hear right now also. Let's say you talk about RBI. You talk about RBI governor, Reserve Bank of India governor, and he will become a head of monetary policy committee. We are just taking an example because he is RBI governor. So this is ex officio. Just because you're holding another post, you will be eligible for one more post. So ex officio. All these terms we'll see. However, in central as well as official majority, again, you don't have to do PhD here. In Indian Council Act, the most important part here is members will keep on increasing now. Later on, you will see that it will be increased from 16 to 60 in Legislative Council, in center and provinces. But the one important thing which you have to keep a track of is Executive Council, and especially Central Executive Council. Executive Council at the center, how many members are there and when Indians will be there. Fine. Cool. I was saying something, I forgot. We'll talk about that. So here we are having, again, whatever things we have just discussed, that is being written in expanded form. Here the act was criticized by Congress. Why? Because there is still no direct election, and we have talked about it multiple times now. Rajya Sabha, very good, Samrat. We have talked about it multiple times now, and this is very, very, very important, and I think has been asked again multiple times earlier also. Which particular act introduced direct election in India for the first time? Let's, taste your brain. What was that act name which introduced direct election for the first time in India? I will give you 30 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 30. So 30 seconds gone. Direct election first time introduced in India via 1919 Act. Please don't forget it. This is actually very, very, very important. One of the most important things which you have to keep in mind. And we'll talk about it later on as well. So now we'll talk about 1909 Act. Before we talk about 1909 Act, let's do one thing. Let's make, comparative analysis like this. 1909, 1919, and then, oh my God, see, let's give some more respect to 1919 Act. And some more space, and then 1935. This way, if you do comparative analysis, it is easier. So 1909 Act, also known as Morley-Minto Reforms. Morley and Minto Reforms. This is also known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. Always do this comparative analysis. This will help you. And this is again Government of India Act. So when you talk about all these, like 1909 Act, it is known as Morley-Minto Reforms. 1919 is known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. So the first name belongs to Secretary of State. That will also help you in understanding. So the first name is Secretary of State. The second name is Viceroy. So this way, you can even solve other questions related to not 1935, that is 1919, Kritika and Samrat. So this way you will also be remembering that around 1909, who was the Secretary of State for India? Lord Morley. Who was the Viceroy of India? Minto, Lord Minto. Similarly here, 1919, Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. Montagu is the Secretary, Chelmsford is the Viceroy. So this will help you. Around 1919, who was the Secretary, who was the Viceroy. So yes, this is one point. Then 1909 Act, if you talk about it. So 1909 Act, separate electorates will be introduced for Muslims. Separate electorates. Separate electorates means what? There are two things. One is joint electorate, other is separate electorate. So joint electorate we currently also have in India, joint electorate. So there are seats, let's say they are reserved for SC/ST. In joint electorate, so there are seats reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So people who will be elected from those seats will be scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people, but everybody can vote. That is joint electorate. We have currently joint electorate in our country. But when we talk about separate electorate, let's say seats are reserved for Muslims. So separate electorates for Muslims will be introduced by 1909 Act. So in this scenario, Muslim will be elected from that seat and voting will also be done by Muslims. So this is separate electorate for Muslims. This 1919 Act will extend separate electorates for Anglo-Indians, for Christians and other communities. So separate electorate will be extended. Then separate electorate will be extended furthermore for women, depressed classes, etc. So this whole extension is happening because separate electorate provision is allowing Britishers to divide India further. And that division is evident even right now also, where any political party, anyone can play binary card to divide us because, this has been a tried and tested formula in the past, and Britishers have given us a template that you can divide Indian people. They are very easy and very gullible and they can be divided. So this policy was started by Morley-Minto Reforms. He started dividing people. First separate electorates for Muslims, then it was extended for Anglo-Indians, Christians, etc., etc. Then for women and depressed classes. So this is one point, and that's how you do comparative analysis. If you talk about some more things related to all three of them, Executive Council. Up until 1909, there was no member in Indian, like Viceroy Executive Council. Now, 1 out of 6. So there are total 6 members in Viceroy Executive Council. 1 member will be Indian, and that first, everything first is important. That first Indian member who was part of Viceroy Executive Council, his name was S.P. Sinha, Satyendra Prasanna Sinha. This Viceroy Executive Council members, he will be, like Indian representation will be increased from 1 to 3. So 3 out of 6 members in Viceroy Executive Council will be Indians. And here also in 1935, you have 3 out of 6. Viceroy Executive Council, 3 out of 6 members will be Indians. So this is one point which you have to keep in mind. So these are some points which are important from exam perspective. If we do some more comparative analysis, this bicameralism thing which Samrat is writing in the comment section, bicameralism at center. What is bicameralism at center? So bicameralism at center means that currently you see Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Currently you see Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. This Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, it had its genesis in the 1919 Act. This point you have to remember. So bicameralism at center introduced in 1919 Act. Bicameralism at provinces. This legislative assembly and legislative council thing which you are seeing in the provinces, this bicameralism at provinces were introduced by 1935 Act. Always do this comparative analysis, that will help you. Fine. So bicameralism at center and provinces. What else points we can use to demarcate or differentiate these things? And these three are the most important acts, sir and ma'am. When you're revising stuff, and if you have time paucity, focus on these three, and they are the most important acts. Okay, so we are doing a comparative analysis. Let's continue the discussion. Okay, let's make this thing. So bicameralism at center, bicameralism at provinces. In 1919 Act, they will do something. Britishers will do something. What they will do? They will introduce diarchy in provinces. Diarchy in provinces. So diarchy in provinces means what? Just like you have Governor General, now who is known as Viceroy at center, so you have Governor in the provinces. So a governor, here also governor has two council, Executive Council and Legislative Council. If somebody asks you right now, out of Executive and Legislative Council, who is more powerful? Even at the provinces, if you have two council, governor has two councils. So which is more powerful? Executive Council or Legislative Council? I will give you 20 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 20. So out of governors, executive or legislative council will be more powerful, as Samrat is saying. Fine. So diarchy in provinces has been introduced. Now they will divide, like currently you have union list, state list, concurrent list. You have different subjects. You have police, health, education, etc., etc. At that time also there were different subjects. So what they did was they introduced diarchy in provinces and they divided all these subjects, be it subject of health, education, police, law and order, local government, etc., etc. And they divided it into two parts, reserved subject and transferred subject. The reserved or the more important subjects, they kept it with Governor's Executive Council, and the transferred subject or not so important subjects, they kept it with Governor's Legislative Council. This is known as diarchy in provinces, and this whole system proved a big failure, reserved and transfer, as Kritika and Samrat they are saying. So this whole system proved very, it was a complete disaster, complete failure in provinces, because Legislative Council, where you had Indian members, they were like, dude, you are not giving us good subjects. You are keeping police with yourself. You are keeping revenue with yourself. You are keeping all the important things with yourself, and you are giving us, local body, you are giving law and order, you are keeping with yourself. What is this, bro? All the revenue fetching things and other important stuff, you are keeping it in reserved list, which is with governor and his executive council, who are not responsible to the legislature. And governor and legislative council, where you have Indian members, you are giving us useless subjects with due respect to all those subjects. That is transferred subject. So there was too much criticism of this diarchy in provinces. And later on, when we'll talk about 1935 Act, diarchy in provinces will be abolished and diarchy at center will be introduced. Please remember this. Diarchy in provinces, they will be abolished. Provinces gone. It will be introduced at center. So these are some important points which you have to keep in mind. They are very important point. And once you are doing the comparative analysis, you are understanding things in a much better manner. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay, sir. So we have done ample number of compare and contrast here. Let's now delve into these acts. Do remember these compare and contrast, whatever we have done. And then there are other points also. Bicameralism we have talked about, diarchy we have talked about. Okay, let's talk about some more points. Let's do some more comparative analysis. This is the easiest way to clear your concept in a better manner. Okay, so now direct election part, we have just talked about it, that direct election introduced in 1919 Act, direct election introduced. Before that, you had no direct election. Direct elections introduced. But around 1919, when we are talking about this 1919 Act, so direct election, 5 to 6% of the population, they got voting rights. Only 5 to 6% of the population. That direct election or the franchisee, right to vote, that will be expanded in 1935 Act. That will be expanded. So all these points, they are very, interrelated, and you have to remember them just like that. Okay, now let's have a talk about it. So Morley-Minto Reforms, 1909 Act, the most important provisions here are separate electorates for Muslims that will be introduced in 1906. And that's why you should read all these acts at the same time, because once you have read all these acts, you have a brief idea that what particular event is happening. So 1906, Muslim League will be formed. 1906, Muslim League will be formed by Aga Khan. Just 1 year before that, in 1905, partition of Bengal had happened. So there is too much division among Indians, as we have it currently as well. Hindu, Muslim, this and that. So this division was there. Britishers had succeeded in dividing India into like Hindu and Muslim faction. So the Muslim faction under Aga Khan, they will go to meet these guys and they're like, dude, we are such loyal servant of you, British Crown and British Parliament. So just give us more adequate representation. And that would lead to separate electorates of Muslims. That will be introduced by 1909 Act. Cool, sir. So 1906, Muslim League, 1905, partition of Bengal. So much protest happened. Swadeshi and boycott movement happened. So Britishers are realizing that we have to give them some concession, we have to give them some leeway, and that's why for the first time one particular Indian will be introduced in the Viceroy Executive Council. So everything which is happening for a particular reason. Divide and rule. Exactly, Kritika. Earlier also people followed divide and rule, and currently also it happens in so many parts of the world. This divide and rule always works. So Indian Council Act 1909, Legislative Council at the center and provinces increased in size. So why? And again from 16 to 60 members, but we are not taking it seriously because we don't know this Legislative Council, be it at center or provinces, they don't have much power. The power lies with Executive Council, and that's why this is a cheat code for you. Rather than keeping a track of these members increasing from 16 to 60 or this and that, you can have a look at it. The most important part is keep a track of the Executive Council where actual power lies. Fine. So Legislative Council, now we are talking about Legislative Council and center and provinces. The members are continuously increasing. We just need to know these members, who they are. Ex officio members, we have just taken an example. RBI Governor, he is the head of Monetary Policy Committee. That is ex officio. Ex officio means because he is RBI Governor. Doesn't matter who is RBI Governor, he will become the head of Monetary Policy Committee. So similarly, ex officio member, Governor General, and just because you are Governor General, you will become member of the Executive Council or Legislative Council. Nominated official members means you are a part of government setup, you are a government official and you have been nominated to some of the Legislative Council, be it central or provincial. Nominated non-official member means you don't have a government job, simple terms. You are working in some private sector, some council, this and that, and you have been nominated to central or provincial Legislative Council. Elected members, that means they have been elected by different categories of Indians. Maybe these Indians are zamindars or local council body members, but you have been elected by them. So these were 4 different categories. Again, you can have a look at them. These are fine. This is about central and provincial Legislative Council, and they don't have much power. And power matters everywhere. So here power lies with Executive Council, and that's why we are giving more importance to Executive Council with due respect to central and provincial Legislative Council. Fine. So elected members were elected indirectly because we have just discussed direct election will be introduced for the first time in which particular act? Elections are currently also happening indirectly. So local bodies will elect members of Provincial Legislative Council, where you are seeing it. And then these Provincial Legislative Council in turn will elect members of Central Legislative Council. Direct election will be introduced for the first time via which particular act? What was the name of this act? Che Pandis, Che Pu, Telsu, Ledu, Kadu. So that, as Samrat is saying, 1919 Act, and Kritika is also saying, very good here. Okay, sir. So again, we are seeing, see this sir with such a dense mustache. We cannot objectify him anymore. So his name is S.P. Sinha. Satyendra Prasanna Sinha. And he is important because he is the first Who is he like the first Indian member appointed to Viceroy's Executive Council? So out of 6 members of Viceroy Executive Council, you have your first Indian member, Satyendra Prasanna Sinha. So that is what is written here. Separate electorates for Muslims. These are very important provision. Separate electorates for Muslim, first time Indian member in Viceroy Executive Council. These are the 2 most important provision which you have to keep in mind. Then Council of like Secretary of State, here also 2 Indians are nominated. That's fine. But real power is here. And then expansion of legislative council at center and provinces, that will keep on happening. That is also fine. But don't forget this separate electorate and Satyendra Prasanna Sinha, sir. That is not fine. Okay, now factors leading to this act. Lord Curzon, we'll talk about, governor, governor general and viceroy. So you will see and hear about Lord Curzon, 1899 to 1905. That will be his period as the viceroy of India. And he is very infamous. Very infamous, and because he did partition of Bengal on the pretext of religion, because he realized that it's very easy to divide Indian people on the basis of religion. You just have to ignite one stuff, or make one movie and people will fight. It's very easy to ignite people on the basis of religion, and he did just that. And he divided Bengal, Eastern Bengal and Western Bengal on the pretext of religion, partition of Bengal. That is one bad thing, and generally people associate him with bad things only. But since you people are UPSC aspirant, you will be giving after pre-mains also. So then in mains, we'll talk about his good policies, like University Act is also one of the bad things only, because that stifled freedom of speech and expression. But he did so many other things. He reorganized army, Kitchener Act and all those stuff happened. So many things he did, which were actually good. PUSA, there is an agricultural body which is there in Bihar, which is known as PUSA, PUSA. He was the one who is responsible for establishment of PUSA. So even in the people who are very bad, you can find the good stuff. And that's what you have to do as a serious UPSC aspirant. You need to have both these points, Fine. Rise of extremists and the revolutionaries. So 1885 to 1905, that was moderate phase. People were like, dude, now comment section is gonna I don't care, Kritika. It's just that my work is to spread, keep people united, and I will keep on doing that. I have to keep people united. I cannot let them get divided on the basis of religion and other stuff. So again, it doesn't matter to me what it will cost me in life or something, but I will keep people united. I will never let religion divide people. I've already seen too much division among people. So it doesn't bother me anymore now. I've become very thick-skinned. I will not let religion divide people. So let's focus here. Rise of extremists and revolutionaries. So extremist phase. So what we are talking about here, 1885 to 1905, moderate phase. You have, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. We'll talk about it when we'll talk about formation of Congress. So you have Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Dadabhai Naoroji, Firoz Shah Mehta. All these people are moderates. People are like, dude, you people, believe in triple P. Prayer, petition, protest, and nothing is happening out of it. We have seen what has happened in 1892 Act. Nothing was given by Britishers to us in that act. That act is a forgery. So we don't believe in moderates anymore, and that will lead to rise of extremists. Lal Bal Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Aurobindo Ghosh. So these extremist people, they will emerge. And even these extremist people by 1907, 1908, they will be arrested. They will be sent to Mandalay jail and this jail and that jail. So people will be disillusioned, and that will lead to rise of revolutionary. Some people say them as revolutionary terrorist and all those. No, you have to use the word revolutionary extremist, where you will later on put Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, and here you will talk about Khudiram Bose, here you will talk about Prafulla Chaki, here you will talk about Savarkar, here you will talk about Anusilan Samiti, so many things, Barindra Kumar Ghosh. So all these people are rising, and Britishers are feeling like we have to keep a tab on them, bro. We have to give them something. And that's why Morley-Minto Reforms came, where they gave Muslims something, separate electorates, where they gave Indians something, representation in Executive Council, where they gave Indians something more representation in Viceroy's Legislative Council as well as Provincial Legislative Council. Fine, sir. So similar deputation. Here we are talking about the formation of Muslim League. Do remember these dates. When was Muslim League formed? 1906. Muslim League formed. Sometimes what will happen? They will give you these Morley-Minto Reforms, Muslim League, formation of Muslim League, Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms, and some other thing. And then they will tell you to arrange them in chronological order. So these dates actually matter. Main provision, and again, now we are seeing Morley-Minto Reforms in the expanded version. We have already seen the important parts and the points related to them. Additional members in legislative council. Nobody takes these legislative council seriously. So it is getting expanded and expanded. They are the law-making body. Law implementing body is the executive council, where for the first time we have one Indian member. And separate electorates. We have just seen and do understand this thing. Separate electorate, joint electorate. They can give you this question. India currently don't have any kind of electorate, like, separate electorate or joint electorate. That is wrong. We have joint electorate, that is for SC, STs and other reservation. We don't have separate electorate currently in our country. Under the Act, functions of councils were enlarged. Here again, we are talking about legislative councils. They have been given the power to ask questions, this and that. That is fine. You can have a look at it. And then the 1919 Act. We have talked about 1919 Act when we have done the comparative analysis. Please understand. We have talked about the three most important acts. Three most important acts are 1909, 1919, 1935. But the two most important acts are 1919, 1935. 1919 Act will act as a base for 1935 Act. 1935 Act, as we have just discussed earlier, will act as a base for Indian Constitution. Almost 50% or more of the provision of Indian Constitution is borrowed from 1935 Act. So Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms, 1919 Act. And what happened here? What are the important things which we have just discussed? Like direct election for the first time introduced, but around 5-6% got voting rights. Bicameralism at center. Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Why I have made arrow here when I'm writing there? Oh my God, I am so messy. Leonardo Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Okay, let's focus here, bro. So bicameralism at center was introduced by Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. You are not realizing what we are doing here. I will tell you what exactly we are doing here. When we had done comparative analysis, 1909, 1919, 1935, there we have also talked about all these provisions. Here also we are writing all these provisions. And the third time I will show you all these slides. So you will be seeing one particular thing 3 times, and then we'll solve some questions. So you will be seeing them for the 4th time. And then when you are revising all these stuff, 5th time, 6th time. So repetition is the mother of learning. Bicameralism at center. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, they have genesis in the Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. Fine. Then Diarchy in provinces. This whole Diarchy setup, which we are seeing in the provinces, reserved and transferred subject. Reserved, more important subject, that will be with the governor and his executive council, and the transferred subject, which will be not that important with due respect to these subjects, that will be with governor and his legislative council. So Diarchy in provinces. As Kritika is saying, 1909, 1 member in Executive Council of Viceroy. Now you will have 3 out of 6 members Indian in Viceroy's Executive Council. In Viceroy's Executive Council. Other things will also happen because these 2 acts are the most important acts, but these 4 provisions, you have to keep it in mind. They are very, very, very important. Okay. Government of India Act 1919, Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms. Montagu is secretary, Chelmsford is viceroy. And then here again, you have to understand what was happening in the background. So Government of India Act 1919, around that particular period, First World War has ended, and there is a movement which is going on. Muslim people are not very happy with the treatment of Khalifa, which has happened in Turkey. So all these things are happening, and non-cooperation movement, and before that Khilafat movement started. Before all these things happened, there was a Home Rule League movement which was started by Annie Besant and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. All these things were happening. Gandhiji was emerging as a leader, and he led so many localized struggles. Champaran struggle, that there is a mnemonic for that also. Cake. Champaran, Ahmedabad and Kheda. All these things are happening. More and more people are participating in Indian national movement. And from this particular period onward, 1919 up until 1947-48, you will see something known as Gandhian era. So all these things forced or, made Britishers realize that we have to introduce some form of responsible government in India, and that will lead to the passage of 1919 Act. Separate electorate for Christians as well. Very good, Kritika. As you people are saying, please mention components of 2 lists. We will do that. Shamra, don't worry about it. We are just discussing the basic points here. So as Kritika said, we have talked about separate electorates point. That separate electorate was introduced for Muslims. The separate electorates will be extended for Anglo-Indians, Christians and other communities. So all these things will be happening, and that's why these 2 acts are very important. 1919 and 1935. Sometimes I feel like 1919 is more important. 1935 is just copying the provisions of 1919 with due respect to 1935. So again here, the bold picture is given. Provincial subjects are divided into two parts, transferred and reserved. As Samrat is saying that please sir talk about the two component, we'll talk about it. So this, and again, bicameralism, direct election was introduced for the first time. Everything for the first time is important, sir and ma'am. You know, that you have to keep in mind. Anything for the first time is very important. Now, we are talking about Diarchy at provinces. Please remember this. Most of the people get it confused with Diarchy at center. Diarchy at center will be introduced via 1935 Act, where subjects will be divided between governor or viceroy's executive council and legislative council. Go there later on. So here we are talking about provinces. In provinces, you have two kinds of subjects, transferred and reserved subjects. Let me give you some example. So reserved subjects, let's say police, you know, let's say revenue, let's say law and order. So what this Diarchy did was they kept police, revenue, law and order. I'm just giving you some example in reserved subjects, and that will be taken care by governor and his executive council. These executive councils, they are not elected, nominated by anyone. They are handpicked by governor and they have the main power. Then transferred subjects, let's take an example, local body. It was kept under transferred subjects, you know, not much power. Even currently, after the passage of, 73rd and 74th Amendment, panchayats and municipalities, we know how powerful our third tier of government is, how powerful panchayats and municipalities are. So these kind of subject, local bodies, they were kept in transferred subject, given to governor and legislative council, where we had our representations. Indians were there in legislative council, provincial legislative council also, and that what led to debate. In fact, in this particular act, 1919 Act, they also said that after 10 years, we will review this particular act and there will be a commission which will be established, and that commission was known as Simon Commission. But that commission was not formed after 10 years. That was actually formed after 8 years only, 1927. Because around 1927, there was supposed to be an election in Britain, and people felt like that if they are so we are talking about elections. Separate election means elections were supposed to happen in England around 1927. And people felt like and the government who was there in Britain at that particular point of time, they felt like if the government changes, let's say there is a Liberal Party there or some other party there, and if the government changes and some other government comes, then what will happen? And then maybe some other committee will be appointed. So before that happens, before that 10-year period is over, let's appoint a particular commission known as Simon Commission. And that happened in 1927 only. So even before 10 year was done, 1919, if you do a simple CSAT, 10 year will be done by 1929. But that was done by 1927 only, and Simon Commission was established. We'll talk about Simon Commission later on, but hope you're understanding what is happening here. And please understand this reserved and transferred subject and the issues associated with them. Okay, sir. So this is the point which we have to keep in mind. Then again, these points we have discussed. This is just given to you. You have to look at it. We have discussed all these points. This is an expanded version for you. So granted for franchise. Franchise is not IPL franchise, Lucknow Super Giants and this and that. Franchise is right to vote here. Sometimes when you teach, some people come outside and you get deviated a bit. So let's focus here. Here, again, there are restrictions. Like when we have talked about earlier also in ancient and medieval India, we have talked about voting rights, and we have talked about Uttara Merur inscriptions. And there also there were restrictions, who can vote, and property rights and all those stuff were there. That if you have certain amount of property, if you have knowledge of Vedas, in those scenarios you can vote. So here also there are, conditions, property, tax, education, and voting rights are given to around 5 to 6% of the people. We'll see that. 3 of the 6 members, all these points we have discussed, bro. Communal representation, which Kritika said, was extended. 1909 Act, separate electorate was for Muslims. Now it has been extended for Sikh, Indian Christian, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. Please keep this in mind. And that's why this is highlighted. This is important and you have to keep it in mind. Again, Public Service Commission will be established. This will be done in 1935 Act also. New Office of High Commissioner is created to ease the burden on Secretary of State. It is, and this is also an important point. Generally, UPSC has not yet focused on this particular point up until now, but they can always focus on this particular point. What is the meaning here is, what I'm trying to say here is that here, most of the people, when they read this particular point, let me go somewhat like this. So they feel like Secretary of State post is abolished. That is not what this particular statement is saying. Secretary of State post is not abolished. A new office of High Commissioner for India in London has been created. Some of the powers of Secretary of State has been given to him. Secretary of State post is still there. Don't get confused here. People generally get confused here. To ease the burden on Secretary of State, a new office of High Commissioner has been established, and they have been given some of the powers, not all the powers. Secretary of State is still here. Cool, sir. So, John Simon, this is the point which we were discussing, that we have to review something, and that review happens anywhere and everywhere, whether you are in a government setup, private setup, or anywhere. People review your work, how you are working, what work you are actually doing. So here, 1919 Act, it has to be reviewed after 10 years, but it was actually reviewed after 8 years only, because government has to be changed. So this is Sir John Simon, and this point you have to keep in mind, because when we talk about Simon Commission, or when you have read about Simon Commission, you may have seen some modern history question on let me take a break. You may have seen some question on Sir John Simon and his Simon Commission. The most favorite question is that it was boycotted by Indians because it had no Indian representative in the Simon Commission. This is the most favorite question, but most of the people don't know why this Simon Commission was established. The reason was to review 1919 Act. And this is not the only commission which will be reviewing 1919 Act. Later on, when you're reading modern history in detail, you'll be seeing roundtable conferences which will be happening. First roundtable, second roundtable. Lothian committee will be there. White paper report will be submitted. So it's not like it's a one-time review. Multiple commission comes, multiple reports comes, and they review 1919 Act. Fine, sir. So again, we are talking about all these points. Act carried out. This is an expanded version. Just have a look at it. They are talking about that previous situation was what? You had Home Rule League and all these things, and Britishers realized that they have to introduce something. So now all these explanations are there. They are saying that we want to gradually, bring a responsible government in India, blah, blah, blah. Please read it. I'm not reading. And they wanted to increase members of Governor General Executive Council. 3 would be Indians. We have discussed it. Bicameral legislature happening for the first time at center. This bicameralism at provinces will be introduced by 1935 Act. Okay, sir. What else, sir? Indirect election was abolished. Oh my God. Finally, this indirect election thing is gone, and direct election has been introduced for the first time, as we have discussed earlier. Very, very good. So now we are just doing the revision part. Now this is an additional point, that apart from the veto power, like currently you have Security Council, Security Council you have. And when you talk about UN Security Council, so 5 members, permanent members, they have veto power. Veto means to forbid. Most of the people don't know. They just read veto, veto, veto. It's not veto, vico, vajradanti. It's veto means to forbid. That, let's say, 4 members of UN Security Council, they are saying something, and 1 member, let's say Russia, they say veto. So that means they are forbidding it. So that is the point which you have to keep in mind. Fine. Cool. So veto power means to forbid. So here, Governor General, he had been given, especially we should be writing here, Viceroy, he has been given the veto power. That means to forbid. But here he has also been given the power to certify. That means, let's say a bill has been refused by the legislature, which you can see. But he feels like, no, this bill has to be passed, so he will certify it. That I feel for the unity, for the safety, for this and that, this bill has to be passed, so he will ensure that this bill is passed, even though legislature has refused to pass it. So that was the power, and that is the power of certification. It is different from the power of veto. So don't confuse it. They are not the same, bro. Okay, sometimes I see ad and I remove those ads. Okay, so let's continue the discussion. Diarchy has been introduced. Again, you are seeing the expanded version. We have talked a lot about it. Please read it. I'm not reading the slides. Oh, now here they're talking about transferred list, which kind of subjects are there. Reserved list is most important. Most of the important subjects are there in reserved list. When you will see questions on reserved and transferred list, so you will realize one thing. What you will realize that sometimes people ask that, sir, we are not able to solve those questions. UPSC has already asked questions on reserved and transferred list, that we are not able to eliminate options. We don't know the exact subject. You don't even need to know exact subjects. When they are asking you which of the following are reserved subjects, which of the following are transferred subjects, just see which of the following are most important subjects, which of the following has revenue component or law and order component. And the most important subject has to be reserved subjects, because that is going with governors, executive council. That way you can eliminate option and you can arrive at the correct answer. What I'm meaning by it is, I will show you one question and a PYQ, and we'll try to solve it by this particular logic. So reserved list, they have given the names and everything. You can have a look at it. What subjects are there in reserved and transferred list. I'm telling you, you don't need to mug up any subject in reserved and transferred. Just remember, reserved list more important, transferred list not that important. That will be your sole criteria, major criteria on which you will be selecting subjects. Okay, sir. Franchisee, right to vote, again not confined to IPL, and it is only 5 to 6%. That will be increased by 1935 Act. That also we will see. Women could not vote. Muddiman report, they will do the analysis of Diarchy. And again, as we have seen, Simon Commission is not the only commission which will review 1919 Act. Muddiman report is not the only report which will do the analysis of Diarchy. There will be Lodhian committee, there will be 3 round table conference, there will be a white paper, because they will do multiple analysis. It's not like your 10th mark sheet, or 10th mark sheet is actually very important. It's not like your midterm exam or something that it will be only reviewed once. It's about a country called India. So it has to be reviewed multiple number of times. Then 1935 Act. We have already talked about all these things. Now we are doing multiple revisions now. So 1935 Act, on which 50% or more of our constitution is based. So what we have talked about, yes, biggest issue, exactly. So 1935 Act, what we have talked, Diarchy in provinces abolished. This Diarchy, it got a lot of criticism because we have seen it was very, very biased. And it was favoring, or it was not favoring Indians, because we had representation in Legislative Council and we had been given very, very poor subjects. So Diarchy in provinces abolished and Diarchy at center introduced. I'm not writing the whole thing. I will just write like this because I'm lazy. So Diarchy in center introduced. Fine. Bicameralism in provinces introduced. So this is bicameralism. So this Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha thing, that happened via 1919 Act. And this Legislative Assembly Council thing happened via 1935 Act. There was a proposal for federation, that India will become a federation, provided 50% of the princely states, 50% who has, 50% population representation and all those things. There were certain conditions there. If that conditions are met and princely states come together, British states are there, and all these states come together, will become a federation. But that thing did not materialize. Proposal of federation. Then they talked about establishment of a new Supreme Court and establishment of Public Service Commission, blah, blah, blah. All these stuffs are there. Diarchy, and then again the separate electorate part, which I think Kritika said earlier. This will be extended further. SE, separate electorate, will be extended for women, depressed classes, all these things will happen. Voting rights, that will also be extended. Voting rights, up until now, first time right to vote, direct election 1919 Act, but by this 1935, almost 1/6 of the population, something like that, they will get the voting rights. So voting rights also extended. So these are some important provisions which you have to keep in mind when you are reading these acts, sir and ma'am, and that will help you very good. So now you can have a look at the expanded version, distribution. So what we have discussed, Diarchy in provinces, they have been abolished, Diarchy at center introduced. So Diarchy at center means again they will divide subject into reserved and transferred. At center, more important subjects they will keep with themselves, and like Viceroy and Executive Council, not so important subject will be there with Viceroy and Legislative Council. Before they do that, they have divided the list. They have made a list, federal list, provincial list, and concurrent list, which is very similar to the union list, state list, and concurrent list which we have currently. And that's why we talk about that Indian Constitution, 50% or more provision is based on 1935 Act, because you can see most of these provisions in our Constitution as well. So All India Federation was supposed to be made, but there were certain conditions which were not met. So we did not become a federation. Princely states did not join. Provincial autonomy. Diarchy at provinces was eliminated. Diarchy was introduced in the center. We have talked about this. This is just a revision happening. Diarchy at center introduced. Act provided introduced bicameral legislature in provinces. So Legislative Assembly Council, which you are seeing right now in provinces, that was introduced by 1935 Act. Bicameralism at provinces, 1935. Bicameralism at center, 1919. This thing you have to revise a lot because you can easily get confused. And this is your homework also. Once you're done with this class, you will just close everything and just make, and forget about other acts, 1909, 1990, 1935. Do a comparative analysis like we have done earlier. That will help you a lot. Establishment of RBI. So again, the current RBI trace their genesis to 1935 Act. Federal Railway Authority, you can have a look at this. Then there will be separation of provinces also. Sindh will be carved out of Bombay Presidency. That day's Bombay Presidency also included Gujarat. Bihar and Odisha were split. At that time, Burma was part of India. That will no longer be the case. And then will be separated from India, Yemen. So there is a series called as Friends. In Friends, there is a guy called Chandler. So when he had a breakup with Janice, they used to fight a lot, Chandler and Janice. That Chandler guy, Matthew Perry, is dead now. So he used to say that I am going to 15 Yemen Road, Yemen, Aden. So Aden, Yemen, that was also part of India and that was separated. So all these things were happening. This is the reorganization part which is happening, and the other stuff is written here. The government of India extended a franchise to 1/6 of the adults. This we have discussed. Do remember the most important points which we have discussed. These are additional points. The more you remember, the merrier. The best way to remember them is to solve more questions. We'll solve PYQs. You will solve mocks, and that's how you will revise stuff. Now the Bol Bachchan, now the expanded version. GOI Act is based on white paper, recommendation of Simon Commission, recommendation of, round table conference, Lodhian committee, blah, blah, blah. And that is what is written here. Simon Commission report, Nehru report. Nehru report is not Jawaharlal Nehru. Which Nehru we are talking about? Again, I believe that you don't know about it because we have not yet discussed about it. But still, if I ask you, which Nehru report we may have been talking about here? Chepandi, Chepo, Telsu, Ledu, Kadu. So I was in Hyderabad and these were the words which I learned, Telugu words. Chepandi, Cheppu, Telsu, Ledu, Kadu. Nenu, Ninnu, Premustu, Nanu. Cheppu, Telsu, Ledu, Kadu. They rhyme, but they don't make any sense actually. So, as Samrat is saying, Motilal Nehru, he is the father of Jawaharlal Nehru. Roundtable conference, white paper, Lodhian committee. This Lodhian committee is to review the franchise thing. Voting rights, which was given for the first time in 1919 Act, direct election. Motilal Nehru as Samrat and Kritika are saying. Very good. Abolition of Diarchy in provinces. Now this is the expanded version. Same thing which we have discussed 1,000 times now is written. This point is expanded in a much better manner. You can understand it. Federation part, that everyone will come together. Sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka prayas, sabka this and that will happen. That means everyone will come together. But there are conditions here. How this federation will be made. State entitled to at least half of the seats allotted to the states in the proposed council, and population also half. So there were certain criteria that 50% of the more seats who are occupying, if all those states are coming, 50% of the more population of the states, if they are coming, then we will be making the federation. If let's say only those states are coming which are comprising 48% of the population or 48% of the seats, will not make a federation. And since this 50% criteria was not satisfied for both of these scenarios, federation was never made. Diarchy at the center, this we have discussed. Again, bro, separate electorate extended for women as well as depressed classes. And this is an important point. And this point you have to keep it in mind. They can ask you this. Regarding which particular act, Jawaharlal Nehru sir commented that we are provided with a car, all brakes and no engine. Which particular act we are talking about? Is it 1919 Act, 1909, 1935? So you have to remember which act we are talking about. Now, let's solve this question. PYQ for you, in front of you. Oh my God, my voice is gone. My voice is gone. OMG. Oh my God, my cheeks are red. So here they're talking about what were the objectives of Queen's Victoria Proclamation of 1858. 1, to disclaim any intention to annex Indian state. 2, to place the Indian administration under the British Crown. 3, to regulate East India Company's trade with India. Select the correct answer using the code given below. A, 1 and 2 only, B, 2 only, C, 1 and 3 only, D, 1, 2 and 3. This is for those people who are Divyang. There are some people of mine, some dear friends of mine who can't see but who watch my videos and they hear it. So it's my duty to tell them the options as well as the question. So yes, sir. Samrat has given the answer. Okay, so Objectives of Queen's Victoria Proclamation. To disclaim any intention, this we have discussed. They are already saying that, bro, we don't want to annex any more territories. First is correct. Do option elimination. You're left with ACD. To place the Indian administration under the British Crown. That also we have seen. EIC gone, formally, informally, and British Crown has come. So second is also correct. If second is correct, you eliminate this. Now you're left with A and D. Regulate East India Company trade. This thing has already happened, bro. This thing has already started via, Charter Act of 1813 and all those stuff. So this thing is not talked about because trade thing has already gone by 1853. So the answer is A1 and 2 only. So this is a tricky question. Do revise these questions. These are PYQs. If you don't revise it, you can easily forget it. Another PYQ in front of you. Okay. Which one of the following is not a feature of Government of India Act of 1935? Government of India Act 1935, they introduced Diarchy at center, but they abolished Diarchy at provinces. So this is not a feature. Diarchy was there at the center, but they abolished Diarchy at the provinces. So the answer is A, as Samrat and Dark are saying. Cool. So this is again an interesting question. Bicameral legislature was there at provinces, provincial autonomy was there, All India Federation, they talked about it. Not a feature, not a feature. A. This question, Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919 recommended granting voting rights to all the women above the age of 21. Second statement, the Government of India Act of 1935 gave women reserved seats in legislature. Which of the statement given above is are correct? A1 only, B2 only, C, both 1 and 2, D, neither 1 nor 2. Oh my God, oh my God. So, okay, I got a lot of answers. Anoop, Dark, Samrat, Kritika. So, again, this is the extreme statement, bro. Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms recommended granting voting rights to all women above the age of 21. This is 1919. First time direct election. First time voting rights. 5 to 6% got voting rights. How come all the women will get voting rights? Eliminate one. Eliminates A and C. You're left with B and D. 50% probability. Try to attempt those questions. Government of India Act gave women reserved seats in legislature. We have talked about this. Women depressed classes. So, the answer is B. 2 only. As stated by Anoop, Dark, Samrat and Kritika. Not Kritika. Kritika said D. B is the answer, Kritika. Let's solve this question. In the Government of India Act 1919, the functions of provincial government were divided into reserved and transferred subjects. Which of the following were treated as reserved subject? First, administration of justice. Second, local self-government. Third, land revenue. Fourth, police. Select the correct answer using the code given below. A1, 2 and 3, B2, 3, 4, C1, 3, 4, D1, 2, 4. Chapandis. Now, this is the question which I was talking about earlier. This is the PYQ. Have they written PYQ here? This is a PYQ. So, please understand one thing. These kind of questions, because of which what happens, people start, remembering all reserved and transferred. Just try to think. We have discussed this. Dark has given the answer. Samrat has given the answer. Reserved is most important, where governor and executive council, they are having a say. Let's see which is most important. Revenue, obviously. Revenue is very important. People say money is not important. First earn money, bro, then give those lectures. So money is actually very important. So third has to be in reserved subjects. Eliminate option which does not have third. So you have money in your pocket now. let's say you also have police in your pocket. So money, police, you have in your pocket. Police is very important. Then law and order is in your pocket. So police also has to be there. So if police has to be there, eliminate option which does not have police. So now you have money in your pocket. Now you have law and order in your pocket. Let's bring judiciary also into your pocket. And that's what rich people do. They have money, law and order, judiciary, everything in their pocket. And that's why they rule the country some way or the other. So justice also has to be there. Out of local self-government, justice, which is more important and can be kept in reserve subjects. Obviously justice. Because if you have money, you have law and order, and you have also bought justice, with due respect to justice here, you have everything, bro. And that is what is the dream of every Indian is, that we can control all these three entities. Again, that's a joke. So the answer is C, 1, 3 and 4. So please understand, these kind of questions can be solved with elimination. It's not like this is the question which was solved and that's why every question can be solved. You can solve it. You cannot, this is not possible for you to remember all reserved and transferred subjects. You can have a look at them, but do option elimination. That will help you. Reserved more important than transferred subjects. So that is written here. You can have a look at it. I will share this particular PDF in this Telegram group, Fun Study with Shubh. And I think tomorrow will be a holiday, so enjoy. Tomorrow is holy, so enjoy some more. I'll be sharing it by tomorrow, day after tomorrow morning. Like day after tomorrow morning, I'll share it in this Telegram channel. Study with Shubh, Fun Study with Shubh, because study should be fun. And yes, sir, you can join our Sampoorna March batch. Admission is closing on 15th March. You can use my code SHS Live, which you're also seeing in the bottom portion for maximum discount. Join us. And these are the important features. I love this. Please clear 20, 25, 26, but again, this is for 2026 batch. Any of your friend who is giving, supposed to be giving UPSC in 2026, they can take this course and they can clear prelims 2026, they can get full refund. So that's it from me. Any queries, any doubts, sir and ma'am? Otherwise, I'll be gone and I will remove all these things from my cheeks. And yes, sir. I will see you day after tomorrow at 7. Welcome, Samrat. Welcome here. Happy Holi to everyone and enjoy it, but don't play too rash, in a too rash manner, you know. So that's it from me. Take care. Be blessed. Tata. Bye bye. Sabak khair. God bless you all.